Hopefully I don't get lost in that. Same. This
breaks. I call it the Baroque stall.
Okay.
So that way if I have to do a jump, my pinky then won't. It's okay. I mean, it's fine. Listen, I'm traditional. You know, it's a blessing. But we're a lot easier to just like see what I think together. Which I absolutely Yeah, the dorms.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is good to see your smiling faces on this incredibly beautiful winter Sunday afternoon. It's nice to not have those conflicts with like football games or Super Bowls or stuff like that. Although I am told there's a good hockey game tonight at 6 o'clock when they are honoring Yammer Yager. And if you're old like me, you remember his mullet that he wore, just because that's who he was. So I saw mullets all around downtown Pittsburgh today. I think that that's the costume of the day. But I don't see any here, and that's okay. But it is good to welcome you to this historic church. I know many of you are familiar with this congregation and with this beautiful church. The windows are spectacular, particularly at this time of the day. We did just celebrate Transfiguration Sunday, and that window is incredible over there, but the resurrection window and the window over here, they're all equally beautiful. And if you watch them, I know you'll be listening to the music, but if you watch the windows, they will change. And I believe that those leaves on those trees actually start to move, but I don't really think they do. But if you keep watching, they almost seem like they do move. So anyway, so it is good to welcome you here. I think it's incredibly good that we as 4 congregations in the city of Pittsburgh and around Pittsburgh are coming together. And I'm very happy to welcome my colleagues here. It's great to see Pam, great to see Tom. It's good to be together. Please join me in a word of prayer. Most gracious God, we do give you thanks and praise for that gift of music that you not only entrust to very talented people, but you put that song in our heart as well. So in this afternoon, we ask your presence with us as we enjoy music together, as we let our hearts be lightened as our Lenten season continues. Be with us as we worship through the music that we hear this day. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen. Welcome. Take it away, guys.
thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. This is kind of an experiment, and I'm glad to see a lot of people that I don't know. Please make sure after the concert today you join us in the chapel, which is through either door, for some light refreshments and a chance to speak to us each. Thank you.
afternoon, everyone. My name is Franklin Mosley, and I am blessed with the opportunity to serve as the Director of Music Ministry at Baldwin Community United Methodist Church. I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank Brian Burns and the rest of the staff here at Calvary for welcoming me into this beautiful sanctuary and for allowing me to play this magnificent instrument. I have a couple of other pieces I'd like to play for you, and I hope that you continue to enjoy the music that my colleagues and I are providing this afternoon. Thank you. my next two pieces, one is a prelude that I play rather frequently at Baldwin Community UMC. But for any of the congregants here from my church that are here, they will tell you that I enjoy to play the organ rather loud. And so before I close out with a more peaceful sounding piece, I would love to play for you a Bach chorale. Again, it has been a pleasure to use this instrument in its full glory. I cannot thank you enough for having me here this afternoon. Our Father, who art in heaven above, by Johann Sebastian Bach. just about 15 seconds to get down to the piano. Brian and I are going to do something special for you if you'll indulge me. I'll be down shortly. This church needs a zip line. Now I know that this is being streamed and I don't have a microphone, but I think I'm pretty loud. Thank you. So, organ is not my primary instrument, though I have blessed the ability to play. Singing is actually my forte, and if you just indulge me, I would just like to sing for you a spiritual in honor of Black History Month, arranged by Mr. Moses Logan. I'd like to sing for you Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. 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 A long ways from home. A long ways from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. A long way. A long way.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mitchell Stecker. I am the Director of Music and Liturgy at Mount Lebanon United Methodist Church. And to echo Franklin's sentiments, thank you so much to Brian, to Pastor Beth, and to all of the good people here at Calvary United Methodist Church for opening up your exquisite space for us to share with you this afternoon. As I was making my final preparations for this program, it dawned on me that it was going to be a little bit long if I played everything I planned and also made remarks about the music, which I certainly wanted to do. So I'll cut to the chase and cut the fat and do all the other cutting euphemisms and simply commend it to you to look up those first three pieces sometime when you're bored on YouTube or Spotify or at your local record store or something. Very high quality pieces of music. They make a nice set, but I think you'll be able to appreciate this last piece a lot more if I tell you something about it. So I hope none of you find this boring, but if you do, this happens to be my favorite time of Sunday afternoon for a little nap, and I wouldn't hold it against you if you tune out for a few minutes, although I would request that you please not snore. For those of you who are interested and or properly caffeinated, I'll be first sharing with you a little bit about the composer, second a little bit about the piece itself, and then third, a little bit of context on why I thought it would be appropriate to meditate upon the story of David and Goliath in this Lenten season. So I spent a little time last summer in a place called Zwickau, Germany, along with my pastor, Pastor Tom Strandberg, and a couple other folks from our church. Zwickau is the home of Robert Schumann and also of the Friedenskirche, which is a Methodist congregation with which my parish, Mount Lebanon Church, is partnered. Those of you in the house tonight who are Western Pennsylvania United Methodists are probably aware of our long-standing partnership with the East German Conference of the Methodist Church. Zwickau is only about 50 miles south of Leipzig, which some of you may know was where J.S. Bach was the organist and town cantor, which is a fancy German word for basically the big boss of church music. I was lucky enough to get to make the holy pilgrimage to that special place, the St. Thomas Church in Leipzig, as all organists are commanded to do once in our lifetimes in our Holy Writ. While Bach is certainly one of my favorites and a singular genius in the field, I started to think while we were there what other organists and composers gifted in their own rights might have been overshadowed by names like Bach or Felix Mendelssohn, also at St. Thomas Church during his career. One name I came across was Johann Kuhnau. He was Bach's predecessor in that job at St. Thomas Church. He lived from 1660 to 1722, so those of you for whom it's been a couple years since music history, that makes him just about exactly 20 years older than Bach, so one generation prior. Kuhnau was born in Saxony, which is that part of eastern Germany where Leipzig and Zwickau are. It's in that little notch on the eastern side of Germany, just above where the Czech Republic sits. So Kuhnau studied in Dresden and Leipzig and was educated both in music and in law. He was appointed to his post as organist at St. Thomas Church in 1684. He was only 24 years old at that time, and at the same time also began to practice law. He stayed at St. Thomas with a promotion to cantor, again, the big boss of church music, in 1702 was that promotion, and he stayed there until his death. So practically his entire career was spent at St. Thomas Church. He was quite different from Bach. Compositionally, his music lacks some of the depth and technical mastery that Bach's music can boast, and yet his interests were much more diffuse than those of J.S. Bach. As I mentioned, he was a lawyer, which for me, I think those two jobs probably would have been enough to fill up my time. And yet, he was also active as a translator. He translated a number of works from French and Italian into German. Once he was a little bit older, established in his duties, he spent his free time studying Greek, Hebrew, and mathematics. Fun. He was also a writer. He penned plays, novels, and satires. One of the few that survives to the present day is called Der musikalische Quacksalber, or the musical quack. It's about a mediocre musician who tries to con people into believing he's an exotic virtuoso by pretending to be Italian. He composed music prolifically, but like his writings, many of his compositions are lost. The 6 biblical sonatas are among the small amount of keyboard music that survives to the present. Somewhat unusual for the period, each of these sonatas is a piece of program music, which is to say, a piece of music that tries to paint a picture of a certain narrative. And as the name suggests, all of these are vignettes from Scripture. Among the others are the story of Gideon, the story of Jacob's death and burial, and the story of David healing Saul by his music. But as you see in front of you, I will, of course, be playing for you the sonata of David and Goliath. Kuhnau illustrates this story in varied ways, providing titles for each movement that help set the stage. Overall, the work is structured like a Baroque dance suite. So in the Baroque and Renaissance periods, a stylized dance suite was a common genre of instrumental composition centered around 4 core dance genres, the allemande, courante, sarabande, and gigue, each of the 4 of these having their own rhythmic and metrical character. In an elaborated version of this dance suite paradigm, Kuhnau's first movement resembles the French overture, which is characterized by a pervasive double-dotted rhythm, which is sort of da-dum, 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 which tends to evoke a general air of pomposity. This is the first way Kuhnau masterfully paints the story in sound. He harnesses the general pathos of the music, in this case the rollicking grandiosity of the overture form, to depict Goliath's brazen boastfulness in front of the amassed Israelite troops. In the second movement, Kuhnau demonstrates a second technique for relaying narrative content to his listeners. He references pre-existing musical material. In this case, Kuhnau quotes the very well-known Lutheran hymn, Aus tiefer Not ruf ich zu dir, which is, From deepest distress I cry unto thee. It was a translation of the 130th Psalm, which is a text, of course, used by many believers in both Germany of the 17th century and of the Holy Land in antiquity to cry out to God in deepest distress. In fact, this hymn is actually in our hymnal as well, number 515. This plaintive chromatic music very clearly communicates the terror and helplessness felt by the Hebrew people as they stared down Goliath, their enemy. The character of the music, interestingly, is almost as though a chorale prelude has been inserted into this dance suite. The third movement contrasts the fear of the masses with the quiet and what Kuhnau calls childlike confidence of the shepherd boy, David, who is calm with an absolute trust that his God will deliver him to victory. The simplicity of the music reflects this, and I can't help but wonder if the slow, rocking triple meter feel is intended to evoke a pastoral scene of a shepherd boy playing on his pipes. In the fourth movement, Kuhnau paints the climactic scene of the story, first with the verbal argument and then the physical altercation between David and Goliath. The movement has a very aggressive rhythmic motif, reminiscent perhaps of a faster dance like a courante or estampie. As the conflict finally comes to blows, Kuhnau demonstrates a third compositional technique for illustrating the narratives, creating onomatopoeic sound effects through the music. As David launches his projectile, for instance, Kuhnau uses a big running figure on the keyboard that seems to suggest a winding up and throwing, followed by a pause in the music before a grand falling gesture, seeming to suggest Goliath's collapse. In the fifth movement, the Philistines flee in terror after they see the defeat of their hero. Kuhnau seems to be using a little bit of a musical pun here. This music, like the second movement, is quite unlike the rest of the dance suite, but actually resembles the keyboard toccata or fuga that was popular in the late Renaissance and Baroque periods. The play on words here is that the term fugue literally means to flee or to fly away. Hence, a fugue here is depicting the fugue state, so to speak, of the Philistines. Those with a good ear and good understanding of counterpoint may be disappointed when you hear that this is not a properly constructed fugue like we would hear by, for instance, Bach, but more a primitive style along the lines of what we would call today imitative counterpoint. They weren't so strict about their fugal rules yet. In what is perhaps a further bit of musical humor, the counterpoint seems to sometimes kind of run into itself, maybe painting a scene of the Philistines knocking their heads together in their panic flight, a sort of Baroque Larry Moe and Curly moment. In the sixth movement, the concert of the women seems to start with a kind of timpani figure in the pedal, and then a somewhat simple, maybe horn-inspired figure. The final movement is a simple yet exuberant depiction of the Israelites dancing for joy in the presence of David. Fast and in a triple meter, it evokes something of a jig, which is the conventional way of ending a dance suite. I've included in your program the verses referencing the portions of Scripture from 1 Samuel from which these vignettes are taken, and if you're so inclined, I would encourage you to follow along in a pew Bible as I play. All right, if you glazed over during all of that, now's the time to perk back up, because you need to hear this part. You're going to get a little sermonette, sorry. I have a full musicology degree and a little bit of a seminary degree, so, the gift of gab is my special talent here. Yeah, and after all, Andrew Carnegie said, right, one of the reasons he gave all the money for those pipe organs was that pipe organs lessen the pain of sermons. So you're getting a lot of organ music and just a little bit of sermon, so it'll be good for you.
That's what who's playing the organ.
That depends on who's playing the organ. Fair point, Franklin. So at first blush, maybe it's a little strange to spend some time thinking about David and Goliath during Lent. After all, if you listen to your sermon this morning at church, aren't we supposed to be thinking about, Jesus at this time of year? Well, Jesus and David have a special relationship to one another. Of course, David is one of Jesus' ancestors, and more than that, David was a king of Israel, which parallels Jesus' kingship. Theologically speaking, David is called a type of Christ. And what this means is that David was essentially a prefiguration of Jesus, possessing some of the elements of Christ, and hence foreshadowing the coming of the Messiah in important ways. As David stares down the big, ugly beast, the people of Israel are in awe, not of David's large, muscular stature or his impeccable skill with a sling, but of his absolute trust in and reliance upon God to help him defeat this seemingly unconquerable enemy, even when the older and rightful ruler of Israel, Saul, was, and all of the armies of the Hebrew people, were too afraid to do it themselves. How much greater then is the faith of the one who commands the wind and the waves, and yet who goes forth unarmed to stare down the bigger, even uglier beast, sin and death themselves. And yet, as he goes forth to his persecutors, his tormentors, his cross, he trusts all the while in his Father's call on his life. And how much greater is his victory, won for his new chosen people, now spanning every nation and race. And how much greater shall our joy be as we dance in gladness on that Easter day at the vanquishing of that great and final foe. As we hear the fear and then the joy of the ancient people of Israel in this story painted for us in music by Johann Kuhnau, I hope we can reflect on these themes as God manifests them for us in our own Pentecostal age. And for this great good news, friends, thanks be to God. As I conclude the Kuhnau piece, I will invite you then to close out this grand afternoon of music making and to celebrate that final victory over sin and death won for us by the one who loves us so incredibly deeply, by joining in singing Victory in Jesus, which you will find on page 370 of your hymnal. But for now, without anything further, please enjoy Biblical Sonata number 1, David and Goliath, by Johann Kuhnau. stand up if you're comfortably able. No matter what, sing lustily and with a good courage, as we're commanded in the front of the book. 370. Thanks y'all for coming. I feel weird saying it, but I'm in the highest spot, I guess. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for spending your afternoon. It's been a pleasure. Hope to see you at the next one. And join us in the chapel.